Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this seminar presented by our Pension and Financial Wellness Committee. ARTA is pleased to offer a series of financial wellness seminars throughout the year to create an opportunity for education on topics specific to retiree financial wellness. Since ARTA was formed in 1963, we have focused on supporting our members in an engaged and active lifestyle in retirement. Our holistic approach includes one of the best benefit plans in the country, as well as many additional programs and services, including our discount program, physical wellness events, social opportunities offered through our regional branches, scholarships for family members, and of course, seminars like this one. ARTA also serves as an advocate for teachers and retirees using our collective voice to draw attention to the ATRF and teachers' pensions, the Seniors Drug Plan, the Choice in Education Act, and most recently, curriculum development. There are many different factors that allow ARTA to maintain such a wide reach, but in the end, it all boils down to our organization's financial wellness and sustainability. As a nonprofit organization, we take surpluses we generate and put them back into the benefits plan. And because we were created by retired teachers for retired teachers and like-minded professionals, we remain dedicated to retirees. With that, I'll pass this seminar off to the chair of ARTA's Pension and Financial Wellness Committee, Ray Hoger.
Welcome. As Scott has mentioned, my name is Ray Hoger, chair of ARTA's Pension and Financial Wellness Committee. I'm joined today by Pension and Financial Wellness Committee members, Blair Lowry, Sheila Mackay, and Craig Whitehead, as well as ARTA's treasurer, Lawrence Reichen. As you may have noticed, we have disabled attendee video and audio capability. This will help ensure a quality experience for all participants by limiting web streaming. It also allows us to record this webinar without breaching your privacy. With your audio muted, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions. You can submit questions publicly so that all attendees can see them, or submit them privately, and then only the ARTA staff will be able to see them. Our team or the speaker will respond to questions at the end of the webinar. A reminder for participants that this presentation is for informational purposes only and should not be used to replace a consultation with a trained legal, tax, or financial professional. Please contact a professional for financial, tax, or legal advice related to your specific circumstances. With those housekeeping matters completed, I would like to welcome today's speakers from the Alberta Teachers Retirement Fund, Chief Executive Officer Rod Matheson, and Vice President Pension Services Julie Joyal. Rod and Julie, the next hour or so is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Ray, and committee members, and to all of the participants that are online today. We certainly welcome always the opportunity to be able to speak to our members, and thank you for the invitation today. And it's pretty good timing because we have an August 31st year end. Our year end results were wrapped up, and we had a board meeting of the ATRF board in November to finalize a number of matters. So we're able today to bring you an update, a very current update from our last fiscal year, both in terms of the activities, the financial results, and share with you a little bit about some key priorities that we have for the coming year. So we're really looking forward to this and thankful for this opportunity. So I think my colleague Julie is going to share her screen. And we can jump, Julie, to the next slide. So before I jump into some of the highlights from last year, a couple of slides maybe that would be helpful to set the stage. And I know there's participants today that are familiar with this or that were part of our presentations in the past, but just in the event that there might be some folks that aren't as familiar with ATRF, we've included a couple of slides, and I'm not going to speak to every bullet on these slides, but just a few things that I wanted to point out to kind of set the stage here. As you can see, the Alberta Teachers Retirement Fund is a very long-standing organization. We were established in 1939, and we have continuously since 1939 provided the pensions and pension administration for the teachers in the province of Alberta. We are, as the third bullet says, we play very critical roles, the roles of the trustee of the pension plan, the administrator of the plan, to make sure that the pension plan is administered accurately and timely, and that the benefit payments that retired members receive are deposited in the right account on the right day in the right amount. It's a very critical role. Custodian of the assets of both the teacher's pension plan and the private school plan. And I'm just going to point out there the next bullet, because it is something to stress. ATRF is independent from, we manage the teachers' pension plans on behalf of both sponsors, the government and the Alberta Teachers Association, but we are an independent organization. We are not a creature of either the government or the Alberta Teachers Association, although because we are created by legislation, we are considered a crown corporation or a provincial corporation, but we are independent from both the sponsors. We'll go to the next slide, Julie. And the final little bit of an overview about ATRF that I thought was worth pointing out is with respect to our governance. We have 8 board members. Each sponsor has the ability to appoint 4 of the 8. So the government appoints 4 board members. The Alberta Teachers Association nominates 4 board members. All board members are appointed by the government through an order in council, through a process with the cabinet. So they are legislatively appointed, but the 4 ATA appointees must be appointed. When the ATA puts the name forward, the government must accept that nomination and put forward the order in council. So the board is made up of 8 members, 4 ATA nominees and 4 government appointees. So with that little bit of a preamble, let me now jump into the fun part of the presentation and talk about last year's results. So this slide, I want to start with the investment results for last year. And what this slide shows you, and if you've participated in our sessions in the past, I'm not sure there'd be anything new on this slide because this is not the kind of thing that changes very often. But what this shows you is how the assets of the pension plan are invested by the major asset classes. This doesn't change much from year to year because it is a strategic allocation to what we call return enhancing assets. So that's public and private equities. And then we have inflation sensitive assets because inflation is a key element for our pension plan that we have to manage. So we want inflation sensitive assets to offset the inflation sensitive pensions that we're responsible for paying. So we have real estate and infrastructure investments, and then we have the traditional fixed income, which are bonds. And you can see the percentages there. That hasn't changed. What has that asset mix done for us in terms of returns? The slide on your right shows you our investment returns for the last year. Now, admittedly, minus 1.8% as a total rate of return for the pension plan is not a great number. I want to make 2 comments, though. I don't think anybody would be surprised if you've been following at all what's been happening in the financial markets for well over a year now, and the volatility in the markets. It's probably not a surprise to you that we had a small negative number. In fact, I say small because there's many pension plans in Canada that would have a much larger negative return. We are very fortunate to have a minus 1.8. You can see the green bar beside it, which is what we call our benchmark. So that would be the benchmark of publicly traded securities and the benchmark that we set for the other assets to measure our performance and our asset manager, which is AIMCo's performance relative to. So while we had a minus 1.8% return, our benchmark portfolio had a minus 4.05% return. So on a relative basis, our portfolio still performed better than the benchmark. But the other thing that I want to point out here are the bars to the 2 sets of bars to the right of that, because a pension plan doesn't really focus on 1-year returns. We know we're in this for the long haul, and what really matters is long-term returns. We know that there's going to be years like we had last year where we're going to have negative returns. That's not a shock in itself. But I want to point out that over the last 4 years, and more importantly, even over the last 10 years, the returns that the pension plan has enjoyed 9.04% annual returns over the last 10 years. And that exceeds the benchmark for that 10-year period by a full 1% over 10 years. Now, because of the negative returns, you'll see in the chart on the left, the assets in the plan did decline slightly from the previous year to this year, but we're still about $22 billion in assets. Significant growth from 10 years ago when the assets were just a little over 7 billion. So I'm going to jump now and talk about something that whenever we talk about investments is something that we often get asked about. It's still top of mind with people, and that is the transition of the asset management from ATRF to the Alberta Investment Management Corporation, or AIMCo. I think everybody's aware that that was legislatively mandated, and I just want to say that we did accomplish the full transfer of all of the assets. The transition is complete. All of the assets are now under the management of AIMCo. All of our investment staff were successfully transferred to AIMCo, at least those that chose to go. Some folks chose to look for other opportunities, but all of our staff were afforded the opportunity to go to AIMCo, and the vast majority of them took that opportunity and are there now. So our assets are there, the transition is completed, and what I want to point out here, and what this slide is speaking to, is the fact that the management of the assets has moved to AIMCo doesn't change one of the most fundamental responsibilities that we at ATRF have, and that is investment strategy and investment policy and the related risk policies. The ATRF board is still 100% responsible for setting the asset mix or the investment policy in line with what we believe is the appropriate asset strategy to meet our unique pension plan obligations. That's why we are the best suited to do that, and why we pushed very hard with the government to ensure that we at ATRF preserve 100% what we call the supremacy of the investment policy. We set the investment policy, we deliver it to AIMCo, and then AIMCo's job is to implement it, to execute it in accordance with our investment policy. So AIMCo's job is, or our job now, is to provide the asset mix and the investment policy to AIMCo. AIMCo has day-to-day management of those assets in accordance with our investment policy. That's the fundamental split of responsibilities. So this slide, before I get into talking about the funding results for last year, the actuarial results of the pension plan for last year, just as a reminder to everybody, a couple of things that I want to point out on this slide. With respect to cost of living, COLA, the way the plan works for service pre-1992, it's a 60% cost of living. You get 60% of the Alberta CPI. For service post-1992, it's 70%, and so there's an additional contribution made to cover the additional 10% COLA coverage for post-1992 service. And the other thing that might be of relevance to this audience is the second large bullet there, a reminder that for all pre-1992 service, under the agreement that the government and the ATA struck in 2007, the government fully guarantees by law all benefit payments related to pre-1992 service. So every year, well, we receive, and last year, the slide says last year we received $490 million from the government to cover the pension payments that were made by ATRF with respect to pre-1992 service. Now, to members that have both pre-92 and post-92 service, it's seamless. One direct deposit is made into your bank account every month, but of that amount, some of it comes from the post-92 and some of it comes from the money that we receive from the government for pre-92. And that obligation for the government is on the government's balance sheet with a value of just over $7 billion. So that's what the government has calculated the value to plan members of those future pre-92 pension payments. So let's talk about what happened with the funding status of the plan. in spite of, and I'm going to speak to this in the slide following this, but in spite of the bad news with respect to investment returns for the year, the funded status of the plan, which is the ratio of the plan's assets to the liabilities, the value of the liabilities that we have going forward, it did improve slightly. The pension plan is now 99% funded. So we're about to hit a milestone that this pension plan has never enjoyed in its history since 1939. I don't want to jinx it, but we are on the cusp of having the pension plan being fully funded, having assets sufficient to fully meet the liabilities of the plan. So Julie, if you want to go to the next slide, because that's a good summary of it. That's the sort of a condensed version of the balance sheet of the pension plan as of August 31st, 2022. You can see at the very bottom of the slide on the right-hand column, the 2022 column, the funded ratio of 99%, and that's a function of the value of the assets for the plan at $22.2 billion is just slightly less than the actuarial value of the liabilities of the plan at $22.4 billion. We are just a couple of $100 million away from being fully funded. And again, I said, in spite of the fact that we had a negative investment return for the year. So this is maybe an opportunity to just very quickly point out one of the important risk management tools that we at ATRF and that the board of ATRF have is something we call, you'll see that second line under assets, called fluctuation reserve. What that is a tool that we use it's designed to smooth the volatility in the capital market returns to the pension plan. And we can have plus or minus 15% of the actual value of the assets, the market value of the assets, effectively set aside in this reserve. And so you can see the power of that fluctuation reserve on this slide, because last year at the end of 2021, we had basically what appears on this summarized balance sheet as a negative number, but we had a positive reserve. We were reporting assets that were less than their true market value. Because of the negative returns last year, you can see that has now swung the other direction. And for actuarial purposes, we're reporting assets that are slightly greater than the actual market value that the assets had at the end of the year. That smoothing feature that we use, that tool, allows us to smooth the volatility of the returns in the market over a 5-year period. And so this slide really demonstrates the power of that tool and allows us, even with a slightly negative investment return, to show a slightly improved funded status for the plan. And so what does that mean, and what did the board do with that information at the end of last year? The board every year goes through a process where they look at contribution rates. And in light of the volatility in the marketplace, the board took a number of steps to prudently manage the plan's funding and use the risk management tools that they have available to them. And at the end concluded that they would leave contribution rates where they were. So there will be no change to contribution rates for the pension plan, for the active members of the pension plan, for the coming fiscal year. But the contribution rates, you may recall, they were reduced just this past year. So effective September 1st of 21, contribution rates were reduced, and that was the 4th reduction in contribution rates since 2016. But this year, in light of the market volatility and a number of other factors, the board made the decision to hold contribution rates where they are. So the plan is in very good financial health, on very solid footing. And I think the last slide, and then I'll hand it over to Julie to speak to some of our member experience updates. But this is a slide that we showed that just shows the profile of contribution rates. So current service cost for the plan, the contributions necessary to fund a year of service in the plan is about 18.9%. And the green bar at the top of the slide, that is showing the deficiency payments that are necessary to pay off deficiencies from the past. You can see from this slide that we are now with total contribution rates of 20.21%. We are 1.28% away from the final deficiency payment. And so current contributions are in total are 20.2%. When that deficiency payment rolls off by no later than 2027, the plan will be down to just current service costs of 18.93. So overall, from both a funding point of view, and even in a relative sense, the investment point of view, 2021-22 turned out to be an okay year for the pension plan. So Julie, if you want to take it over and you can speak to some member service highlights.
For sure. Thank you, Rod. So we'll continue with the next section. I am looking at the chat to make sure if there's anything. Of course, adding question now or at the end would be great, but at the end, maybe we'll cover what you want to hear first, and then we can take questions. So I'm always so happy to be here, and any presentation that we do with our stakeholders like ARTA members to talk about what we do, because at the end of the day, we're doing it for you, our members. And from a service perspective, from the initiative that we have and providing some interesting facts and information about your plan is always a privilege. So good afternoon. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm Julie, I'm VP of Pension Services. I'm also an actuary as a background. So anything with numbers is a passion for me. So that's where you'll see a bit of that on the slides. So who we serve? Well, we serve you, ARTA members, retirees, as you can see on that slide. It's a growing proportion of our membership. We're currently serving more than 31,000 retirees, and we're very proud of that. It's definitely the most growing part of our members, but also of liabilities that you've just seen from Rod's slides. The liabilities for retired members is also a growing proportion. So we crossed the 85,000 threshold of total members in the pension plans, and that includes both the teachers plan, the TPP, and the private school teachers plan. But of course, as you can see, the private school is 913. There's no zero missing there. So everything else is in the big public plan. We also serve 98 employers that are participating in the plans that are employing the active teachers contributing to the plan. So 98 employees, 63 of them are school jurisdiction, 17 charter school, 17 private schools, and 5 ATA and ATA locals. We could not do what we do without our members, but also without our employers that are very critical in terms of providing services to our active members that we will accompany them to their journey to retirement. And I'll have a few stats on retirees as well. The average annual pension is also something of interest every year to look at. So currently, all the retired members that we're paying every month, their average pension is around $35,000 a year, which is an increase of 2.4% over last year. And our membership is estimated to reach 97,000 by 2030. A few more stats at the bottom of the page in terms of age of retirement, service at retirement. As you can see from 21 to 22, it's very stable, but we also show some historical information just to see some of the trends. And one of the most noticeable trends in the last 15-ish years is the retired member average age, which is going up. So it was 68 average to now almost 73. So this is the average age of all the retirees in the plan. So why? Well, people are living longer, which is great news. And we have more retirees and that are also living longer. So it's a growing number. It's a great place to be. And our pension plan, that's our purpose, is making sure that we can pay those pensions every month. And that's why the funding is so important to make sure we have enough money in the plan. And we do. The new retired member average age, so that's the average age at retirement. So when people start receiving their pension. It's also a little bit of an increasing trend, but it's definitely stabilizing. We're seeing that. So it was 58 back 15 years ago-ish. And now it's 60, and it's been 60 for a few years. We're seeing that trends either stabilizing or even maybe going up a bit in terms of when people are starting to receive their pension. And that's with the teachers population, but also in general. I'm sure you're seeing that in many professions. Even provincial and public social programs are looking at average age of retirement to increase it. And one of the reasons is people living longer and being more active for longer as well. But 60 is definitely on the lower side of retirement age. When you look at the average from the overall professions combined, we were more around 64, 65. The pensionable service, so how many years of service people have when they retire, that's been very stable as well, and in fact a little bit decreasing. Why? So for example, 26 years of pensionable service back in 2005, and now we're seeing 25 years. The reason for that is a little bit longer university, so starting to work a little bit later, and not necessarily participating in the plan the entire career. So either some changes throughout their career, not teaching actively and participating in the plan all the years. Some leaves, that people are taking and not purchasing back. That could explain some of the decrease, which is not a huge significant decrease. And definitely, I'm sure you've heard that before, that teachers are definitely staying in their career more consistently and not changing profession as much. So good number of years for retirement as well. The active member side, average age, very stable, around 42 years old. And their average pensionable service at this time is around 11 years, which is also very stable. And you might say, well, how can we have 25 years at retirement and 11? Well, think that this includes all active. So from 0 years, just brand new in the plan, up to people just about to retire. So it's the average between 0 and 25 around. Other interesting facts, a lot of numbers, a lot of dollars. I mentioned, the retirees over 31,000. We're paying, this is always impressive for me. When I joined ATRF 6 years ago, I used to work with smaller pension plan. So knowing that we're paying $90 million pension, that's just pension, not even other type of benefits that we're paying for termination or death. 90 million is just pension every month that we're paying to retired members. That's impressive. The stats that you're very, very interested to know, I'm sure, every year, our oldest plan member is 104 years old at this time, and she's been receiving her pension for over 40 years. So very happy to report that, and it's such a great thing to see. But not only that, 104 is our oldest, but we have 51 members that are centenarians, so older than 100 years old. And this number is increasing. Just last year, it was 43. So we have a lot more people living above 100 years old. And 309 are 95 and older. So kudos on everyone with active lifestyle and financial wellness. And wellness in general, not just financial. I think that's it. I mean, there's other big numbers in terms of contribution, but a little bit more for active. Okay. Then, in terms of retirement trends, as I mentioned, some are very stable in terms of age and service, but what's also very stable is the number of new retirees that we have every year. So it's around that 1,000, 1,100 marks every year. We have new retired members starting their pension in the pension plan, and it's forecasted to stay around that 1,000 to 1,100 per year for the next foreseeable future. So those are new members coming in the retired member population every year, which makes that population grow faster. Then some examples of how we serve you, the members, and our active and employers. There's a lot of things we do on communication, wanting to be there when it counts, when the information is relevant and of interest, hopefully, to you, and using some different channels, because we understand that one size doesn't fit all. For different type of topics, different type of events, we know that it's not always digital, it's not always in person, it's not always paper. It's not always online or on the phone. So we're offering all of these channels that you can use at your preference, depending on the life events that you're going through, the type of transaction that you want to do. So we're offering a big variety of channels and services to be there when it matters and when you need us. But just a few examples of what you would have seen, I hope, some of it, such as our newsletter. We publish our newsletter twice a year. And of course, we're looking at different ways of reaching out to people, giving the information at the right time. But the newsletter is definitely one channel, and we're trying to see if we can make it, more targeted, more specific in terms of information. But the last one we published was in the fall of 2022, which is so bizarre. I'm still not used to the 2023. But we've published early December was our last newsletter. So I'm hoping many of you have received it and opened it. It's in a digital format. It's easy. You can just click on what's of interest to you. And we're seeing a lot more what we call the opens, so the click rate, and it seems to be working well. But of course, we're looking at the stats, we're looking at the data to understand how it's being used, but nothing replaces input directly from all of you. If you have any questions or comments or ideas, please reach out when it comes to communication from us. Same thing for the website. It's definitely one of our key channels to provide the information out there. We're trying to be targeted and timely in terms of what is of interest to you, but we don't know. We're not in everybody's mind. So having the website always available, always there for you, and having new content almost daily added so that we keep it relevant, we keep it comprehensive. The website is definitely the place to go, at least as a starting point, to see if you can find information you need, and just know also how to connect with us is the place to go. Our website's super easy, ATRF.com. We're doing presentations and webinars mainly with active members because they have a little bit more of that transaction and planning feature at their stage. But from a retired member perspective, you can also book appointment with us by calling us, so that, if you want to call us, or if you want to do a Zoom discussion, or if you want to be here in person to do a transaction or get information, we always say call us before to book an appointment. It's always better. Why? You get full attention. You make sure you have someone available. It's convenient time for you, and it makes us available and having a safe and ready environment for you if you want to come in the office, having someone with quality time and focus time on the phone or on Zoom or in person. So book an appointment is the way to go. COVID was hard, but there are some things that change in terms of habit of services, and the by appointment and pre-booking is a really good things to do. Online services, our My Pension portal. There's so many things that you can access as a retired member on our My Pension portal, which is not always offered by many pension plans. So we're very proud of that. Your tax slips, your information statements, you can make changes to your account in terms of tax deduction, personal information, family status, and all of that good things, email address, mailing address, all of it is available on My Pension for you to confirm and update as needed, as well as your preference for communication for electronic versus paper when it comes to personalized documents like your tax slips and information statement. So go on My Pension, also accessible through atrf.com, and then it's click on My Pension and you're going to get to your account. Super easy guide to register as well, and just follow the step by step. So speaking of communication, here are some of the examples that are either recent or upcoming. I talked about our newsletter that we published in the fall. The annual report will be published later this month, and we'll have a full annual report published on the website. And we also have what we call the member highlights, or this kind of a smaller version, summarized version of our annual report. And that's either mail or available digitally, depending on your communication preference. And it's also later this month. In fact, on that note, what you're seeing today is hot off the press, not even published yet in terms of results and funding and investment and services. All of that will be in our annual report, which is not yet published. So you're one of the first to hear about it. And that's why, we may not have the slides available right away, but they will be available as soon as our annual report is published. So we're really happy that we can share this information early and timely with you. One of the most interesting information that people want to know at this time of the year, well, I should say two things: cost of living adjustments, but pension deposit dates is also very, very popular. All of that is on our website. The pension deposit dates for the entire year are published. You can know exactly the date, which is kind of easy. It's the third last day before at the end of the month, but still, if you want to know the exact date, they're listed on the website. And the cost of living adjustment is, I know, something that people are very interested to know about. So as Rod mentioned, the pension plan for the teachers had really good provision about cost of living adjustment, which we call indexation or inflation adjustment. So I'll talk a bit more about that, but all I can say at this time is that there's information on the website, it's available, and it will also be on your information statements. Your personalized pension information statements will have all the breakdown and all the detail about your pension before and after this adjustment for inflation. And those information statements will be available on My Pension, but also mailed in the coming days. Like, it's literally a week from now that all of this information will be posted and started to be mailed. I always say, go on My Pension first. Don't wait for the mail. It's there, it's available. You can have it much earlier than waiting for the mail, but it will be mailed as well if it's your preference. As I mentioned, your feedback is so important. You can send it through our email address or any type of questions to retiredmember@atrf.com. So, COLA, inflation and cost of living adjustment. As many of you know, the pension plan have a provision called indexation. So it is for people that are receiving a pension. The pension is adjusted every year, every January 1st, to reflect a partial adjustment for the inflation. And that's called COLA, cost of living adjustment. And it helps limit the impact of inflation and the cost of living. The formula on which the calculation is based, it's legislated. It's a formula, we have to follow it. And it used the Alberta Consumer Price Index, so Alberta CPI. And it's an average of the inflation over the year and compared to the year before, calculated from November to October. So this year, what will be on your pension for the January payment that will be coming at the end of the month, your pension will be adjusted effective January 1st with the 2023 COLA, and that will be based on an inflation rate of 6.2%. So 6.2% is, I'm not saying anything of surprise, one of the highest rate we've seen for many, many years. But at least your pension will be adjusted to reflect part of that. And as Rod mentioned, how it works, it's for your pensionable service before January 1st, 1993 or pre-92. It's 60% of the Alberta Consumer Price Index rate. So 60% of 6.2, which gives that 3.72% adjustment. And then for service after 1992, it's 4.34%, which is 70% of 6.2. So COLA, or indexation provision, is an important feature of the plan. It needs to be funded accordingly. That's why we need to have assumption for inflation in the future and make sure we have enough money on the side to pay for that. But it's not an easy one to do, because who knew that inflation would increase that much? And that's why it's so important to have those risk management levers that Rod talked about, so that the plan can absorb and can pay for these increases that were not necessarily normal, if I may say, but they will happen. It will happen from time to time. It's just a question of how and for how long. But it happened in the past and it will happen again, but we're just in that period of time right now. So it's an important feature of the plan. And if I may say, because I've seen a few, not all pension plans have it. So not all pension plans have an indexation feature. Some pension plans have a pension that you start receiving when you retire, and that's the amount that you're going to receive for the rest of your life. Whereas the teachers plan have COLA, which is a significant benefit. So before I go there, I just want to make sure there's nothing. I see some question. I think for those two, I will keep it for the end. I just have like 2 slides left, so I think we can make it. There's 2 places I'm trying to look at the same time. So I will finish, and hopefully I can then pass the baton to Rod and see what kind of question we're receiving. So the last section, 3 slides, it's just about some of the initiatives and strategic imperatives that ATRF has on our plan for this year, but also coming years, because some are definitely longer term. So our mandate is described here. Like Rod mentioned, our core purpose, our raison d'être, is to deliver the benefits established by the plan sponsors, to make sure that we are investing the assets, administering the plan in a way that we can pay those pensions as agreed upon at a cost and a risk level that is acceptable by the plan sponsors. To do that, we are doing strategic planning and business planning, and we have 4 strategic imperatives. We call them the 4 E's. So excellence, expertise, experiences, and evolution. Excellence in funding and investment strategies, so what Rod covered. Expertise to build trust, credibility, and partnerships, so that's our stakeholder focus. So people like you and ARTA and the ATA and the government, everybody that we work with and for are part of that stakeholder importance and focus that we have. And we want to be the trusted advisor and be there for you when it counts. Experiences are everything that I talked about when it comes to member services, administering the plan, paying the pension, providing the information and the services that you need. And evolution is, as an organization, as ATRF, making sure that we have what we need to operate successfully in a changing environment, because it is a changing environment and we need to innovate and evolve with how we do things in making sure that we are efficient and successful at delivering our mandate. As part of our experiences strategic imperative, you might have heard me and Rod talk about our Project Lantern. So Project Lantern is one important part, not the only one, but very important part of our experiences strategic imperative. And we've called it this way. We started a few years ago, and it's not just a technology project, but it is, a lot of focus on technology, considering that the tool that we have to administer the plan to provide services is very good and very robust, but a little bit aging. So we had that foresight and very good vision 20 years ago when we established that system, but it's getting a little bit older, and we need to create that refreshed technology and refreshed way of doing things. So we've started Project Lantern. We're right in the midst of it. It's definitely, the whole goal is to continue to have the high level of services and efficiency that we have delivered, and we want to continue to deliver to our members. And we need to make that, kind of a once in a generation capital investment to make sure that we can continue to do that. So we're calling it Project Lantern. You have heard of it. You will continue to hear of it in terms of what it means and what it is. A lot of work in the background that you may not see as a member, but you'll see continuously new things that will be available to you and hopefully make your life easier. But some of it is more in the background that you may not see, like all the background technology that we have to update that is hopefully seamless for you. That's our goal, is that you don't see all of this work, but you just see the good things out of it. It is a long-term project, 4 to 5 years roadmap that we are implementing. And we're, like I said, right in the midst of it. We're doing some sequencing of different projects, components, and work is proceeding as planned, on time and on budget. So on that note, what I will do, there's 12 minutes left. I will look at the question and see which one we may not have covered yet. So the first one I see, and I see that it was sent to to host and panelists. So the first question was, did we lose 500 million in the net assets? So what I'll do, Rod, I think it refers to the graph of the net assets at the beginning.
Right.
So I'll go there.
I think it would round to 500. I mean, if you take roughly 2% loss on 22 point something billion dollars, that would be rounded. I think it's certainly in the right ballpark. Yeah, there's the slide there. So yes, we went from 22.4 to 21.9. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the question in terms of understanding our decrease? Yeah. So it's partly loss, but it's also, just regular cash flow of benefit payment.
Thank you. And then I asked another one.
Yes, in terms of dollars, what is the current service cost? Yes, so you could see that here-ish. So the total contributions paid every year. So you have around 800 million of contribution. That's the post, and it includes a little bit of deficit payment, the 1%, 1.28. So current service is the rest of it. So I didn't do the math, but around 700 million. And you can see total benefits paid is 769. So we're almost in that cash flow not positive anymore, which is normal. We've been enjoying a cash flow positive for a very long time because our plan was a bit younger, but we're getting in that point where contribution and benefits are almost equal.
Yeah. Thank
Julie,
you.
I would just add, just to be clear, that 769 that's there, that's the benefits paid for the post 92 plan. I mentioned earlier, we also received $490 million from the government, which we flowed through to the members for their pre-92 service pensions. So that's how you get the 90 million per month in total that we pay out in pensions, is the combination of the 769 for the post 92 and the 490 for the pre-92.
Got it. Thanks.
The next question is, would a prolonged period of inflation and subsequent higher COLA payments have a negative effect on the fund's reserves? Very good question. Rod, would you like to answer? We did a lot of good work on that.
Well, I sure, Julie, I can take a stab at it. You know better than me, probably. Julie, for those that don't know, Julie's an actuary by profession. So she's the one that likes all this math and likes to crunch all the numbers and talk about actuarial. Nothing makes Julie smile more than when we start talking actuarial information and doing actuarial evaluations. But yes, certainly inflation is probably one of the biggest factors we pay attention to, that as far as moving the value of the liabilities of the pension plan. High inflation will increase the future liabilities of the plan. That's in fact maybe a reason. It ties to what I said earlier about the importance of us determining the investment policy, because only we have the information and understand both sides of the balance sheet, if you like, of the pension plan. So we know that inflation is one of the factors that will move the value of the liabilities significantly. If we do have high inflation going forward, if we change our assumption about inflation, that will increase the future value of the liabilities of the pension plan. Therefore, we want to be very mindful of inflation-sensitive assets in how we establish the asset mix or the investment policy for the plan, because we want something that naturally shields us from the negative effects of inflation on the asset side. But so long-winded way of answering that, yes, I think the question was, would high inflation negatively affect the pension valuation? Yes, it would. We take that into account in the assumptions that we use and that the board uses that would ripple through ultimately to things like contribution rate decisions. And in fact, for interest, this year when the board looked at setting those assumptions, given where inflation is today, even though we have not moved off of a long-term assumption of inflation at 2%, we have taken measures in terms of the valuation and the assumptions that we've used to kind of step down from the current inflation levels in the 6% range to step it down over kind of in a graduated way over 3 or 4 years to eventually get back to 2%. But we're certainly not assuming that inflation suddenly next year is going to drop back to 2%. Now, Julie, can you supplement that, or did I cover it enough?
You did very, very well.
Okay.
And we are, testing risk scenarios in terms of what would it be if, how many years can we sustain? And yes, it's big numbers, but the plan can sustain higher inflation for some time. Maybe not forever, but for some time. And then, we are doing those tests every year with the valuation, like Rod mentioned. We've increased the inflation for the short term. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that the money is there. There's so much we can predict, but we can adjust, and we're agile from that perspective, is that we're not waiting until it's too late to adjust if there's something to be adjusted.
Julie, there are 9 questions in the question and answer segment. I don't know how that's going to work out.
For sure. So I'm looking at them now. What I'll do, I'll answer those that are very quick, and then I'll ask Rod some of those AIMCo questions. Some of the very quick question is the average pension payment before or after tax? It's before. Everything that I've shown is before tax. So of course, what you're receiving though in your account is after tax. Will tax slip be mailed out for 2022? Yes, they will be mailed out, but they're always accessible in my pension portal. Even if you've selected mailing as your preference, they're always accessible also electronically, and they will be mailed out. I'm not going to give you a specific date, although I think I know what it is, later this month or early February. It will be as early as possible, and you should have that in your mailbox by end of January, early February. But again, available on My Pension right away, so you can go see.
Okay.
What was the post-92 contribution rate for COLA? 70% of 6.2, so it was 4.34. So 70% of 6.2 is 4.34%. That's the adjustment that you'll see on your pension, January 1st, 2023. Why is the COLA not as high as received on other pension like CPP and OAS? So COLA adjustment is based on formula that each pension plan can determine their own formula. Some plans will have 0 indexation. Some plans will have 100% indexation of the CPI. CPP and OAS, that are federal social programs, are based on full inflation protection, that everybody pays for that. The teachers plan rules are decided and agreed upon by the plan sponsors. The agreement that was made between the sponsors, the ATA and the government, was that pension will be 60% indexed, but in 1992, there was an agreement that there will be more, like an additional 10% that the teachers would pay and fund, and now it's 70% indexation. So again, it can vary. It's based on plan rules. It's either legislated, negotiated, agreed upon. In our plan, it's 60 or 70% compared to other plans that are either 0 up to 100% in some cases, like CPP and OAS. I think one for Rod. Always
Julie,
concerned about.
There's one other really quick one here I think we can knock off. The transfer to AIMCo doesn't require a new user ID and password. I'm assuming that's referring to My Pension, which has nothing to do with AIMCo.
Correct, correct. So the transfer to AIMCo has no impact on the administration of the plan, on the services provided. So everything that you use as a member in my pension or our phone number or everything, it has not been impacted by AIMCo transfer. Your user ID, your password, everything remains the same. Good catch on this one. So back to the first one on the list, always concerned about AIMCo's potential negative influence on the fund. Can you elaborate about possible minefields down the road?
Well, so let me start by saying I don't want to confuse AIMCo with the big policymaker, which is the government of Alberta, because AIMCo too is a Crown corporation. They are a standalone, dedicated investment manager, asset manager. So the negative influences, and I have to say that AIMCo is a very well run, very well governed asset manager, and that's their business. So negative influence on our fund created by AIMCo, I think would be in the areas of things like, if we've asked them to, we tell them how we want to invest the assets by asset class. AIMCo is then responsible for implementing that. If they make poor implementation decisions, it could have some negative effects on the rate of return. For example, if they choose to invest the public equities and they pick the wrong stocks, that will, relative to their benchmark, relative to, so for example, in Canada, the TSX, that will have a small negative impact on the total rate of return compared to that benchmark that I talked about earlier. The only other negative influence that directly that could be by AIMCo would be just in the way they implement or take too much risk in how they invest. But AIMCo has no ability to change our policy mix, to change our investment policies, or to go outside of our investment policies. So I hope that answers that one.
So Rod, I think you see the questions as well. I would say maybe one of the last one, how much money from ATRF was funneled to AIMCo in 2022?
I'm not sure what that, so was in terms of the value of the assets, we moved all of the assets over to AIMCo. So by the end, by partway through 2022, the entire $22 billion of assets had been moved to AIMCo for purposes of their management of them. That's the only money that was moved over to AIMCo. We don't pay AIMCo a fee per se, but their costs of investing are just taken out of the net returns that AIMCo generates. So the money that was moved to AIMCo was the value of the assets, and that was 100% moved by the end, before the end of the year. And there was one other question about AIMCo, who determines the actual portfolios? That we decide the portfolios that we want the pension plan invested in. That's our job in setting the investment policy. We say we want, for example, 15% of the pension plan invested in real estate. I mentioned earlier that inflation is a key concern for us in how we invest the plan. Real estate is a very attractive asset as far as having inflation protection. We tell AIMCo we want 15% of the portfolio, the total portfolio invested in real estate. AIMCo then takes that and they make the decision which office towers or which strip malls or which retail malls they want to invest in within our real estate allocation. That's the split.
Perfect.
Just mindful of time. Do we have time? Do you want to stop now? And
yeah, I was just going to ask.
I think we can go over by a few more minutes. Give us time to answer those last few questions. If people have to depart because they have other commitments, that's fine. But if you guys have the time and the opportunity, let me sure you can finish off the questions that are there.
Happy to do that, because I think we are coming down to the final few here. So what determines the pension reserve? Julie, I'm interpreting that to be the fluctuation reserve that I spoke about earlier. Is that?
I think so too. I believe that's what it is.
And that is determined by a formula that the board establishes. That's the 5-year average that I talked about. It's a tool that allows us to smooth the volatility in the capital market returns. And the rule in the board approved funding policy is that that smoothing takes place over a 5-year period. So the amount in the reserve is simply the math that is driven by the formula in the funding policy that says smooth those ups and downs in the market returns over 5 years. Why did the government initiate the AIMCo setup? If the question is around why did the government initiate the movement of our assets to AIMCo, I can tell you that the government's reason for it is they believed it would lead to lower costs. And that because the AIMCo is larger and has economies of scale in how they invest, the belief by the government, not shared by the ATRF board, because the ATRF board is on record from the very beginning saying that they did not believe that, we do not at ATRF believe that Bill 22, the legislation that required us to move our assets to AIMCo, we do not believe that is in the best interest of the pension plan. We still hold that view today. The government's explanation for the legislation was they believed it would result in lower costs. The point we try to make is in the investment world, costs don't really matter. It's net investment returns that matter. And we were generating higher net returns, so returns after all costs. ATRF's track record was we were producing higher net returns than what AIMCo's track record shows they produce for other pension plans. So, but that is the answer that the government would give. That is why they initiated the transfer of our assets to AIMCo. What else have we missed here?
There's a quick one at the end. If we're implementing Project Lantern to improve administrative capacity, why is AIMCo the administrator? Well, AIMCo is not the administrator. We are. ATRF is still the administrator of the plan, the trustee, and the custodian of the plan. AIMCo is the investment manager. Their role is, I was going to say simply, that's not fair. Their role is to invest the assets, the money, but everything else, ATRF is still responsible for it, including the administration of the benefits.
Great.
Where can I find the pension and COLA breakdown for my pre and post 92 pension service? In your information statement, it's a total pension that we're showing. So you will see the COLA on your total pension. To see the breakdown, there's a way to do it, but it's not as straightforward. So what I would like to say at this point, I mean, you have statements from the past that you could see what kind of service you had. But if you want to really show like very precisely, give us a call and we can give you those numbers, because we're trying to keep it simple, like everything, like your private school, if you have a pension for the private school or the public school, we're always combining everything, because at the end of the day, that's what gets into your bank account and that's what counts. So we're keeping it one pension amount, super simple. But if you do want to see the breakdown and the precise calculation, we can provide that to you. Just give us a call or send us an email through the retiredmember@atrf.com. Speaking of which, I saw in the answered one, it's atrf.com, not .ca. And there was one last question that was added recently. Oh, maybe two.
There's a couple here. Lower costs for whom? So I should just clarify, when I said the government's rationale for this move of the assets, when they say it will lower costs, they meant it will lower investment costs, which they would argue results in lower costs for both the members that are making contributions and the government who matches the contributions. However, as I said, costs are only one side of the equation. It's really net returns that matter. But their argument was it would lower investment costs, and that would translate into lower costs for members and government. And then, would an NDP government be likely to turn control back to the ATRF? I don't know, but I would say one thing that we have clear evidence of, and that is that when the NDP were in power, Not that it affected ATRF, because we have always, until Bill 22, we had always managed our pension assets internally. But the other Alberta public sector pension plans, the local authorities plan, the public sector plan, the others, they have always used AIMCo. What the NDP government did while they were in office for a brief period of time until the legislation was repealed, but they did pass legislation that gave the other public sector pension plans the ability to move away from AIMCo as their asset manager. So if that's any indication of kind of the direction that an ND government might take, they might very well, if they're consistent with what they did with the other public sector plans, they might very well effectively try to unwind the need or the requirement to use AIMCo as our investment manager.
Okay, I think we've hit all of our answers, and in the couple of pieces there, will there be a video to watch? We have recorded this and it will be on the ARTA website, probably within, I'm guessing here, Amanda would have a better idea on that one, but it certainly will be available within a few days or perhaps a week. I'm not sure on the turnover, but it will be available. Amanda, any ideas on that one?
Yeah, it takes a while to download it and upload it, but probably by early next week. It'll be on the ARTA YouTube channel.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both Rod and Julie for that wonderful presentation and for stretching it out just a little bit to answer the last of those questions. Thank all the attendees for joining us. And this now concludes our webinar. Please, everyone, have a great day and a wonderful new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Rod and Julie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Joyeux Noël.
Perfect.
Well, I spoke Acadian, nobody understands it.
Yeah, it's hard to understand you in English sometimes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, it's like New Orleans. They knew my friend.